Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a massive, global mystery, the sudden, incredibly steep drop in the U.S. birth rate. We're going to look at the fascinating intersection of technology, sociology, and a demographic shift that is quite literally reshaping our future. Let's just jump straight in.
So let's kick things off with a pretty staggering number, -22%. Since 2007, the U.S. general fertility rate has plummeted by 22%. It's dropped way below the replacement rate to fewer than 1.6 children per woman. Now sure, experts have tried to explain this away using economic conditions, crazy housing costs, expensive childcare, you name it. But honestly, those factors just do not fully explain the sudden, sustained nature of this drop. So, what else happened in 2007?
Well, that brings us to a landmark 2026 working paper from the National Bureau of Economic Research. Researchers Caitlin Myers and Ezekiel Hoper asked a wildly provocative question about our primary suspect here. Is the smartphone sitting right there in your pocket actually acting as a form of birth control? I know, it sounds like science fiction, right? But the data they uncovered is absolutely fascinating.
Okay, let's rewind a bit to June 2007, when the very first iPhone launched. Steve Jobs didn't just introduce a cool new device. He actually, completely by accident, initiated this incredible natural experiment. Because for its first 4 years, the iPhone was exclusively available on the AT&T network, meaning if you wanted the first modern smartphone, you literally had to be in a place where AT&T had mobile broadband coverage.
This exclusivity gave the researchers the absolute perfect setup. To prove a phone actually caused a baby bust, they compared counties with near-universal AT&T 3G coverage, what they call the treatment group, to counties with almost zero AT&T coverage, the control group. Doing this allowed them to effectively isolate the impact of the iPhone from all those other general economic trends that were happening at the exact same time.
Look at the exact moment things shift here, right after that vertical dash line in 2007. For teenagers aged 15 to 19, birth rates were, relatively stable before the iPhone. But immediately after its introduction, access to the device in high coverage areas reduced births by 4.5 to 8%. The lines just completely detached from each other.
Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's just teenagers. But nope, the data shows this wasn't just some anomaly. We see the exact same sharp, statistically significant drop for young adults aged 20 to 24. In those high-coverage AT&T counties, birth rates fell by 3.2 to 6.6%. This is prime time for forming relationships, and the data clearly shows a massive behavioral shift kicking in exactly as these devices flooded the market. And this technological shock even rippled up into older cohorts, with a continued decline for ages 25 to 29. Actually, to prove it wasn't just a fluke, the researchers ran placebo tests using Verizon and Sprint's coverage footprints before 2011. And guess what? Those showed absolutely zero effect. It was specifically the AT&T coverage, meaning the iPhone coverage, that drove this decline.
Part 1. The Autopsy. How Phones Replaced People.
So, what's the actual mechanism here? How does a piece of glass and silicon fundamentally rewire human pair bonding? Because obviously, the device itself doesn't stop births. It changes the human behavior that leads to them. Anthropological studies point to this thing called phubbing. We've all seen it, let's be honest, we've probably all done it, ignoring the people right next to us in favor of our screens. This divided attention heavily impoverishes face-to-face interactions. It weakens those critical social environments like parties or spontaneous hangouts, where relationships and romantic encounters historically form. When you take away eye contact, you restrict the fundamental experiences we need for emotional bonds.
On top of that, the illusion of constant contact leads to what anthropologists call connectivity fatigue. It's that exhausting stress and anxiety from the pressure of being uninterruptedly available online. This causes an emotional overload that actually drains our energy for making physical, real-world connections. We feel like we're constantly socializing, but in reality, we're just exhausted by our screens.
So tying this back to the NBAR researchers, they mapped these concepts into 3 specific behavioral shifts driving the demographic change. First, the iPhone displaced in-person peer interaction. Second, having the internet in your pocket meant far better, totally private access to contraception information. And third, there was a massive rise in digital substitutes for partnered sex.
Let's zoom in on that last point for a second. Look at the Google Trends search interest in pornography. It literally more than doubled between 2007 and 2011, going from an index of 40 up to 86.
The iPhone made on-demand adult content always available and totally private, essentially acting as a direct digital substitute. And survey data backs this up, confirming that as smartphone adoption soared, actual sexual frequency among young adults dropped significantly.
Part 2. The verdict. A staggering attribution.
Okay, so when you put it all together, from that rigorous AT&T monopoly data to the clear shifts in socialization, the researchers drop an absolutely staggering conclusion. The study explicitly attributes between 33 and 52% of the entire decline in the U.S. general fertility rate among women aged 15 to 44 directly to the diffusion of the iPhone. To put that into perspective, out of an observed drop of 6.2 births per 1,000 women during that window, up to 3.2 of those missing births are statistically assigned to the introduction of this one single device. It is a real game-changer of a stat.
This all leaves us with a pretty profound realization, doesn't it? The screen in our pocket hasn't just changed how we talk to each other, it has structurally eroded traditional pair bonding. As things like the network state and algorithmic dating replace traditional, real-world relationships, we really have to ask, what happens to the future of humanity when we trade messy, physical connection for a frictionless digital illusion? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I have a feeling you're going to look at your phone a little differently today.